Right, ladies and gentlemen, it is Norway Chess 2025. We are at round 5, halfway through what is shaping up to be an excellent tournament. This is the final game, kind of, and then everybody will have played everybody once, and then we'll be getting the rematches from tomorrow. The players had a rest day yesterday, and that resulted in all the classical games being drawn. What that means is I have only Armageddons to show you today. But before I do that, give me 10 seconds of your time. June 4th. I don't know what time yet, but June 4th. Huge announcement coming out on the channel regarding the Road to Glory series. It is some awesome stuff. I know I look orange at the moment. Awesome stuff coming June 4th. With that said, let's get into the games. We start off with our world champion, Gukesh. He's taking on Wei Yi. Wei Yi has got the white pieces. A reminder, in Armageddons, black gets draw odds in exchange for 3 minutes less on the clock. Wei Yi begins with e4. We get c6, a Caro-Kann defense from the world champion. d4, d5, and Wei Yi decides to play the exchange Caro-Kann. Now, considering white needs to play for a win, it's a very strange decision. Because black is better slightly because they've got two central pawns, and you're going to get a lot of symmetry. So we'll probably get the move c5 at some point, or c4 or c3, and you get a very similar structure to what develops in the French defense in the exchange variation. Except the e pawn is now a c pawn that's disappeared, and you're going to get this structure where where both players develop their pieces. We get knight f5, queen h5 gets played. I don't know what's happened. There it is. I don't know why my computer's lagging. It's very late at night. Maybe it just decides it needs to go to sleep. And now we get h6, kicking back the knight. So white goes for an attack early, but this gives black a slight edge. So we get g6, kicking out the queen drops back, and white has to checkmate black. That is basically what they're going for. So they have to play aggressively, so Gukesh just has to survive the attack. So we get h5 played, but now knight e5. And here, Gukesh decides to take with the bishop. But that allows d takes e5, which is just better for white. Because after f6, you can now play bishop takes f5, and after e takes f5, you've got queen g3. King h7, and now e takes f6. Queen takes, bishop hits the queen. You can counterattack my queen, but I've got queen h4. Queen slides forward. Now knight d2, which is a slight inaccuracy, but perfectly fine. Wei Yi's attack just plays itself. Gukesh has not really equalized the time scenario. Queen g4, knight f3 defends the queen. It was defended twice. Queen takes and knight takes. Bishop d7, rook d1, rook a d1. White just has a beautiful position. Like, this pawn is a weakness. You struggle to defend it. The king is going to be weak. There are infiltrations for the rooks. Black's pieces are just not coordinated. White is just better. White is just better. Rook a e8, looking to trade. We play rook takes e8, rook takes e8, and now h3, giving the king lift. Rook e2 is an inaccuracy because you've got rook takes d5, and even though you can start hunting pawns as black, you can start trying to hunt these pawns, your king is weak. Like, there are mating attacks. We play b4, a6 gets played, slight inaccuracy. The best move here for black is to play rook e5 to try and trade the rooks, because if you trade the pieces, it's less noticeable the advantage that white has. White's real advantage is the fact that their pawns are so active, and you can't move the rook because the bishop would fall. So you would have to trade into something like this, and you would still have bishop takes f4, and white would be up 2 pawns in this scenario. And it's still much, much worse for black, but at least you're not completely dead. You can play knight c4 or knight d3 or something like that. Gukesh doesn't find it. He plays a6. We get bishop takes f4, rook takes a2, knight to f3. We're going that way. we're going for your king. King g8, knight d2. Looks silly to be going that way. I thought we were going forwards. Sometimes you got to go backwards to go forwards. We give a check to the king. We defend the knight. We can move our rook now where it will be protected. And we just got to find a good square for our rook. Rook to g5 is not so good. And now there is a move here that Gukesh can find, and the evaluation is less than +1, and it's starting to move back towards a draw. And that move is knight e7, which he finds. He finds the correct defensive move. Now white moves their knight out the way, but now look at Gukesh's knight. It's activated. It's now threatening to take the bishop, which would disrupt the pawn structure and allow like a rook d3. So we have to give a check, trade off the knights this way, and now there are holding chances because you've got opposite color bishop endgame. If the rooks get traded, this is a draw. So Wei Yi cannot afford to trade the rooks. And also look at the time. 1 minute 57, 1 minute 33. Time is level basically. So this is going to be a shootout. They do start getting some bonus time after move 40, I believe. King f7, rook d5, rook e1, bishop e3, bishop to e3, if I can speak properly, is a great move because it disallows the rook from having the complete open file, and white once again has some advantage. It's about +1. Because white has got a complete open file, black can go this way, but there's not really much for you. You want to be on one of these two files. Now we've got bishop to c6, hits the rook. Rook just slides up a square. Rook e2, king g3, rook e1, rook d8, not the best move, but fine. Rook e2. The players are going to be playing inaccuracies because now they're quite low on time. Rook h8, and now rook e1. You can see Gukesh's black rook is just trapped, really. It cannot really go anywhere useful. So he's just kind of repeating moves with it. Now check forces the king forward, and now we're going hunting for pawns. The king has to defend, king to f5, but now bishop d4. And now you are in real trouble, because yes, your rook can escape, but for how long? We play f3, and yes, you can play rook d6, but now rook e7. g5 is an inaccuracy, because we can play h4. G takes h4 is horrible, because just king takes. White is now completely winning. Check here, and we are looking to weave a mating net. Check. The bishop blocks, and g3, and Gukesh resigns. Simply because, well, he has to take with the rook, or king takes, and he will lose the bishop. So either king takes, and you lose the bishop, or you play something like rook takes, at which point I play rook takes. When you take, I take like this, and the game is just over. White emerges up a bishop. The world champion loses in the Armageddon. Now, we go to Hikaru Nakamura versus Arjun Erigaisi. Once again, the classical game was drawn, so we are into the Armageddon. Knight f3 is the first choice from Arjun, and knight d5. c4, e6. So we've almost got like a reverse Sicilian kind of thing here, and now we're just in a straight up Queen's Gambit declined. Knight to f6, Queen's Gambit declined. Knight to c3, a6, Queen's Gambit declined. C takes d5, e takes d5. This is the critical way to play. Bishop to f4, and c6. So far, the players following opening theory haven't spent much time at all. Hikaru has thought a little bit about his approach. He's spent about 30 seconds or so of his time. e3, bishop d6, looking to exchange bishops. Bishop takes d6, queen takes d6, and queen to c2. So far, normal stuff. Knight bd7, bishop d3, short castles, rook e8, rook ab1, which is a strange move. Here, I can understand rook fe1, rook a c1 also makes sense because you often try to fight on the c file. Rook ab1 is a strange move to me, but Arjun obviously knows what he is doing. a5, and now h3, disallowing any piece in the future from coming to g4, always a good move. And now there are no games in the database. b6, rook fc1. So this is the idea. You didn't want to play rook. You didn't want to bring the a rook here because you want to bring the f rook here, and you think your rooks are best on these files, which is interesting. Because you might say, well, don't you want to put the rook here? Because isn't the idea here to play e4? That's what I would think. But Arjun obviously has a plan. Bishop to d7, a3, c5, and now bishop b5, rook ec8, rook d1. What's going on? Why would you bring your rook to the c file when they challenge you? Why don't you just slide your queen over? Why do you play rook d1? I don't understand. But Arjun knows what he's doing. I'm going to keep saying that because he's a grandmaster. And grandmasters obviously know what they're doing all the time. Knight f8. Incredible move. Queen f5. We now mobilize the queen towards the king side. Queen e7. And now knight to a4. We're going for some of the weaknesses that black has now created in their position. I don't know why this rook is not on the c file. But anyway. Bishop to c6. Looks to kind of try and hold things together. But isn't that a fork? And what Arjun calculates here is knight takes b6. Which is a mistake. The best move here that gives white the most advantage is to play bishop takes c6. Rook takes c6. And then d takes c5, b takes c5. And now you can just play knight to c3. And that is a problem, and the knight gets in here and will be supported, and this is the way white should play to get the best advantage. Knight takes b6 goes for tactics, because now you have bishop takes b5, you have rook takes, threatening the queen, and after the queen slides over, again, why don't you take this back? Why don't you take this back? Because rook's hanging. So the queen actually defends that square. So now you can trap it by bringing the queen over to c7, d takes c5, now rook takes, and now rook dc1. That rook went from f1 to c1 to d1, back to c1. Maybe we should have left it on c1. a4 now. Knight d4 hits the bishop. Bishop puts itself on c4. Now c6, pushing the pawn forward. Knight g6, and now queen c2, looking to hit the a4 pawn. Queen a7 defends both. Queen c3. Now knight e7. And rook d1. Again, and this time it is a blunder. The best move here for white is to play b4. And if en passant, you can play knight takes b3 and rook takes b3 are both fine. Knight takes b3, you might be worried about like queen here. But it's not really a problem because you can just play like knight d2 or knight d4 and you're fine. There's no queen hanging, it's defended. But rook d1 is a blunder because you can play knight e4, but h6 is also perfectly fine. Rook bc1. I've been complaining about these rooks the whole game. Why? Why didn't we start like this with the rooks? If you weren't going to play b4, what was the point of having the rook there? Knight e4 now hits the queen. The queen has to drop back to e1, and now knight takes c6. Knight f5. Knight e7. Back, a mistake, which gives Arjun some hope. We trade the knights, and now rook d4. There's a tactic here that wins nicely. Or not wins nicely, but the move to give the drawing chances, otherwise everything is better for black, is to play rook takes. And rely on this tactic with bishop takes d5 and taking here, and king to h7. And I think this is the best way to hold for white. Remember, these two pieces for the rook and a pawn. Although white's up material, so it's 2 pawns, I think. Yeah, it's 2 pawns. So it's these two pieces against a rook and 2 pawns. White should hold, but the 2 pieces with the queen can very easily mobilize against the king. So rook d4 is a critical blunder. Rook b8 is played. Now rook c2. Rook b6. Queen a5 hits the rook. Rook hits the queen. Queen drops back to e1, and now rook g6 is played. Queen d1. Queen g5. We're just threatening mate. So what we do is we defend with queen f3. Now bishop b3, bishop to b3. So I just need to get the words out. Rook to c8 check. King h7, and now h4 deflects the queen kind of. Takes, and now queen takes here. There is now only one move for Hikaru to win this game. There's only one move. And he has to sacrifice the rook. Because you have only one choice. You have to take the rook. And queen g4 check is a fork. So you can have like king to f1, and you don't continue to try and harass the king. You just play queen takes c8. And this will be winning for Hikaru with the black pieces. Instead of that, he plays rook f6, which now loses to queen to g8, king g6, g3 kicks out the queen, queen g4, rook c7, king h5, rook takes g7, rook g6, queen f7, and now bishop to c4 is a blunder. The only move here to not get mated right away is to play queen e6. To try and find with seconds on the clock is impossible. Bishop to c4 is played, and now simply rook takes g6, queen takes g6, and g4 check. What will have to happen is you'll have like king g5 and simply f4 check. And you will lose the queen and you will lose the game. So Hikaru Nakamura resigns. And now it is the main event of today. It is a rematch from the 2018 Classical World Chess Championship. It is Fabiano Caruana against Magnus Carlsen. They both surprised each other a lot in the classical game. It was very interesting from a theoretical point of view. Fabiano decides to play e4. He goes back to e4, and we have e5. Knight to f3, knight to c6, bishop to c4, and knight to f6. They had a Spanish in the classical game. Now Fabiano playing an Italian, and he plays d3. He doesn't go for the knight attack. Bishop to c5, c3, d6, knight, bishop to g5, h6 kicks out the bishop, bishop retreats, and now a6. a4, this is all theoretical. I'm just going to continue to fast forward the moves as the players, although I say that. Queen e7, I don't really understand from Magnus. He obviously knows what he's doing. You don't want to play knight d7 first to go here. Because if you play knight d7, Fabi will take and damage the structure. He hasn't yet committed his king. So bishop e7 continues the pin, but also defense of the knight with the queen. So he does that, and then when they take up space, he has to play knight d8. So maybe his idea is to go here and get the knight to e6. That might be his idea. So castles, knight to e6. Perfect. Because you're still getting to f5. It's the same square as you would access from g6. Now d4, the principal move to play in the Italian, and now knight to f4. Rook e1, and now bishop to g4. Knight to f1, now knight to g6. So Magnus just went the long way. He went here, 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 and here. It hits the dark squared bishop, so now the bishop must make a choice, and we choose to play bishop to g3. And now bishop takes f3, queen takes f3, and now we take on d4. C takes d4, bishop takes d4. Magnus has won a pawn. Rook d1 though, and this is the compensation. So we move the queen out the way. Fabiano has given up a pawn. Why is it still level? Because he's got compensation. His pieces are really active, his rooks are active, and his bishop is active. The only piece not really playing for him is this knight. Black's pieces are kind of just standing about, and neither of these rooks are in the game, and his king is still in the middle. So Magnus has won a pawn, but at what cost? Bishop to a7, now retreating the bishop. This is his most active piece, his prized possession. Bishop to, knight to e3 rather, not bishop to e3. And now we give up the bishop. Why? Because that knight was about to get into the game and go to some useful squares. Now knight to h5 is a mistake from Magnus Carlsen. For one reason only. Fabiano can take this knight. And after d takes d5, you have got permanent problems and you play rook ed3. And you have got permanent problems along this file. You will have to play move, 24 short castles. And this will be significantly better for the man with the white pieces. Instead of that, Fabiano plays bishop to e2. allowing the capture of his dark squared bishop. And after short castles, he goes for f4. But now knight to d7, bishop to f3, and a5. Lovely move from Magnus. We push b5, and now Magnus gets to transition and kind of change the structure and win another pawn. Why does he win the pawn? Because queen can't take, because the rook is hanging. So the rook moves. Now we go here. Now we get the exact same pin, but against Magnus. But now rook d7, and bishop to g4 is a blunder. Fabi here has got numerous holding moves. The problem for him is he's got to push for the win, because he's got the white pieces. Magnus is up 2 pawns, and the time is level. Magnus Carlsen is already a fantastic blitz player. Now he's in a position where he doesn't even have to win the game to win the game. Magnus for you. So bishop to g4 is Fabi's attempt to try and win. That's all I can summarize it at, really. Knight takes e4. The queen slides over, and now we just slide our rook out the way. So he's now down 3 pawns. You can win this one, but now, oops. Oopsie daisy. Fabi's king might be in trouble. And we trade the queens, but this is Magnus Carlsen. He's up 3 pawns. He's just going to push them. And Fabi continues to try and harass. Magnus even makes a slight blunder with rook d6, because rook takes, knight takes. This is a draw. Magnus only needs a draw. Bishop takes d5 is a tactic, so Fabi wins 2 pawns back. He's now only down a pawn, but now we play c5, and bishop b3 is probably the final nail in the coffin, as that pawn goes too far, and there's not much you can do to stop it. And Fabi actually runs into a problem here with his king. He kind of ran his king to a dangerous scenario, and his king gets mated. Like, straight up mated. Like, you might think, but that's not mate. Like, I can block with the rook, but that gives up the knight, so I can just go here. Well, then you run into a fork. Oops. So Fabiano goes down to Magnus Carlsen. Magnus Carlsen, the only player to win today with the black pieces, and he continues to lead Norway Chess 2025 as if anybody was shocked. I'll see you later. Watch out for June 4th.